Opening the bag, you'll find three separate bags inside. The biggest one is the main part, which is the eccentric part with the shaft in it and the base plate. And the next one is the motor mount, which has already been cut to fit onto the motor for the V belts. And the third packet is with the drive belts in it. And what else is there in there? It's in the very big pulley belt wheel. Okay. Okay, we're going to open the smaller of these two bags first. This is the one with the motor mount in it, and the small pulley wheel which is fixed on the crankshaft of the engine. And you'll see in here there's all these small pieces, and I'll put them on the table so you can see exactly what they are. The biggest piece is the engine mount, and that's the pulley wheel. Here is the Loctite, and we've got here in this bag is a small leg which is fitted onto the base plate here to support it on the front of the aircraft. There is the little brass cone tiler, which is put straight on the back of the crankshaft, and then comes the pulley wheel over this. Oh yeah, because right, I'll show you. That's the pulley. Can you see that now? That is the brass cone which goes straight onto the back of the crankshaft stub, and this then fits over the brass cone. And there are some screws, 4 of them, and 4 distance pieces. The distance pieces here, they go between the base plate here and the motor. And these here are the screws to fix the base plate onto the engine. Okay? Okay. Take all the small bits and put them onto one side, because the next operation is to work on the motor. So we'll clear the table and put the motor on the table.
Hoffentlich.
Camera's on, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, the next operation is to fix the crankshaft by putting a propeller on the front. We're going to fix a propeller on the front here, okay? It's got to be fit, it's got to be really tight to be able to hold the crankshaft still while we put this small pulley wheel on the stub at the back. Okay. On this pulley wheel you'll see it's got 2 sides. It's a bit difficult to see because it's black. The wider side goes towards the engine. A very important process is to degrease the crankshaft stub and this small brass cone. It's got to be really clean and free of grease so that the Loctite holds it really tight onto the crankshaft. Okay, that's it. There's acetone on this piece of paper, and we're wiping off the stub there to get rid of any grease that might be on there. Okay. Next, okay, this is now the small. This is a small pulley wheel. Inside the hole in the pulley wheel, it's got to be free of grease because it's going to be glued with Loctite onto this brass cone, and the brass cone in turn has got to be glued onto this shaft or the stub. Next we start with the Loctite. We're going to put Loctite on the inside of this brass cone. You see now Holger's putting Loctite into the brass cone inside, not too much. And now it's being pushed onto the stub. Okay, the next is to put Loctite inside the small pulley wheel. As I said before, the wide part naturally goes towards the engine. Okay, now that's pushed tight over the cone, and now that's got to be fixed with a left hand nut and a washer and that's it. Comes the left hand nut. Okay. Oh, this is not so. Yes, links. Yeah, it's linked. You've got to remember. We've just remembered. It's not right hand. It's left hand. That's why it's fallen off twice. Okay. Yeah. See, the propeller will stop the crankshaft turning while Holger is tightening up the nut. This nut is pulling the small pulley wheel really tightly down onto the brass cone and fixing it really firmly in place. Okay, good. That's the end of that bit. Okay, the next stage is very simple. Is to remove the propeller hub with the propeller, and leaving the propeller really firmly fixed to the hub so that we can get these screws here loose, because they're pretty tight.
Okay.
Okay. There's not very much to see here. We hope you can see that okay. You see these screws have just been loosened. They require a bit of power to loosen them, but the propeller helps you there. Okay, and now we've got that's the propeller hub taken off. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the next stage is to open up the bottle, which is very, very firmly fixed together with these clips. You have to be careful you don't cut your fingers on the clips. That wasn't tight. Okay. There's an easy way of doing this. That's it. Okay. And that's the shaft. That's the next part. And we're going to fix this shaft onto the motor. But before we do this, we've got to get on the motor these 4 screws holding the bottom crankcase half onto the engine. We've got to be very careful undoing these 4 screws that we don't disturb the seal here between the 2 halves. The screws have got to be very, very carefully taken out without moving the bottom half. Okay? Screws, which we don't need anymore. Okay.
4mm.
Yep. Here's the 4mm standoffs made of brass, and with the longer Allen cap screws, four of each. Okay. And they are now to fix. We're now going to fix the base plate onto the engine very carefully, as I've already said, without disturbing the seal between the top and bottom half of the crankcase. That's very important. If you do disturb the top and bottom half, you have a nasty job of having to clean off the rest of the sealant and then renew it, and it's not a very nice job, and you should avoid that at all costs. Holger's now placed the 4 screws in the base plate, and he's now threading the four brass distance pieces onto the screws. And now comes Loctite onto the screws, not a lot, just onto the threads a bit Loctite, no? Okay. Okay, the screws have been placed inside the holes in the crankcase, And I say we're very carefully screwing the screws down so there's no stress put on the join between the two crankcase halves. Okay, okay, hold it up.
Stopp, das muss man ganz kurz machen.
Okay. Understood. Yeah. You will see there are two pairs of hands. It is certainly easier with two people to do this. Well, this one particular part of putting the base plate onto the crankcase, you're then being sure that you don't disturb the joint between the two halves of the crankcase. Yes, the screws are going to be tightened down.
Nicht ganz festziehen.
No?
So, okay.
Okay. Okay, for the next stage is to put on the motor mount. And this has got to be very carefully done because there are 3 Allen cap screws and 1 hexagon screw. This hexagon head has got to go in this hole here. If you don't get the hexagon head in here, the trouble is the small pulley wheel will hit against the head of the hexagon head screws, but not of the cap screws, but not against the hexagon head. Okay, hexagon head screw in here, and the rest of the other 3 are cap screw.
Okay.
We'll show with the screws in place. Just to make doubly sure, look, that's the motor mount. You can now orientate this. You can see the hexagon head screw is here, and that's the 3 cap screws. Okay, that's pretty clear. Yeah. Okay. Good. Holger is now putting on the 4 brass distant pieces onto the screw holes in the crankcase to take the motor mount.
Oh.
And this is a bit tricky. I'm going to hold the motor while Holger is going to put Loctite on all the 4 screws. It mustn't be too much because you've got to be careful because these screw holes go right through into the crankcase, and if there's too much Loctite it will get inside the engine and onto the crankshaft, and that's not very good. You can see again it's a job for 2 people. This is very, very tricky to do this yourself. In fact, it's well nigh impossible. Yes, the hexagon head now is also being tightened down. And I'll just say it again, the brass distant pieces are between the engine and the aluminium mount.
Okay.
Okay?
Jetzt fasten ab.
Yeah. Yes. The screws are going to be really pulled down now. Yeah. Now the motor mount is finally fixed in place for all time.
Okay.
Okay, just one very small point here. This screw here, we're going to take it out. For the next stage, we're taking the screw out. Okay? This screw is required to fix the strut onto the base plate. Okay, that's the screw. Now comes the
Flat surface.
There's a granite working surface which is absolutely flat, and we're going to you can use at home a windowsill, a marble windowsill, or you can use the saran field on your cooker in the kitchen when your wife is not there. It's not a very good idea to let her see you using the saran field for such an activity.
Genau.
Aber you must have a flat surface. You see, Holger is now just checking the angle with a square to see that this plate here is 90 degrees. The end of the plate here is 90 degrees to the flat surface. Okay?
Bei Bedarf, wenn es nicht passt, muss man ein bisschen losschrauben.
Yeah, and
Und dann nochmal einrichten.
to check if it's not exactly square, loosen these screws here on the crankcase and twist the plate, twist the whole unit a bit. That's the whole unit. That's the base plate with the shaft, and then check it against the square on the end to make sure it is absolutely square to the base plate here.
Okay, und dann richtig fest.
And now the screws are going to be tightened up full time. Really pull down tight.
Ja, vorher Kreuz festziehen.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
This is the last bit on these screws to pull them really tightly down. The Loctite is still not hardened, so we've got about an hour to do that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now we come for the big V-belt pulley wheel. This box, yeah. When you put the hand in the bag, be careful of these kind of small clips. They cut your hand very well. Okay. Take the instructions out of the way, because we know them ourselves very well. There's one very important point here. Is a lot of people make this mistake. This is the piece which goes outside, and this is the piece which comes on the inside. And this is fixed with Loctite on this shaft here. And there's Loctite on this shaft and on this key. There's a woodruff key here. You can see the key here. Well, you'll see it when you're at home doing it. This woodruff key here is then covered with Loctite, and then we pull this shaft onto this. We pull this pulley wheel onto the shaft. And when you put the pulley wheel onto the shaft, it is absolutely essential that it's not fully lined up with each other. It's better for the pulley wheel very slightly outwards, be farther out than it need to be, because when you tension the belts, it pulls the pulley wheel towards the engine. Okay.
Okay. Let's make.
Yeah. So we're going to put some Loctite on the shaft. Not a lot, just yeah. Over the woodruff key on the shaft. The shaft has already been thoroughly degreased, the same as with this pulley wheel here.
Okay.
Now then, we're going to put the pulley wheel. Don't forget with the which is the correct way. The longer hub has got to go outwards, and the shorter inwards. Okay. That's clear to see, I hope. Yeah. Now just pushing the pulley wheel over the woodruff key. That requires a bit of power.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, ein bisschen ausgedrückt.
Yeah.
Okay. This one. Okay. That's the one.
Okay, good. And it's going to be difficult for you to see this in the camera, but we'll do our best to show it to you. If you look now, which I'm holding now, the two grooves on the big pulley wheel are lining up with the two grooves on the smaller flywheel, but a little bit towards the outside. They're not exactly lined up together. The big pulley wheel is towards the outside. As I've just previously said, when we put the belts on and tighten them up, it will pull the big pulley wheel into the correct position, and then it can be fixed. Okay?
Und dann schrauben wir die Schrauben ein.
Ja, okay.
Genau. Jetzt weitermachen. Genau. Und die müssen so ausgerichtet werden, dass die Scheibe nachher gerade läuft.
Okay. So the grub screw is now being tightened down. It's Loctite is in the grub screw hole. Okay. Okay, the next thing is to make sure that these two grub screws are tightened down so that you're pulling on the wheel on equal sides, so that you're not pulling the wheel crooked onto the shaft, so that when the wheel is firmly fixed onto the shaft, it's not going to be crooked, it's going to run true, it's going to be true, okay? Can you see that? It's running very nicely. I'm turning the flywheel, I'm turning the pulley wheel with the shaft here at the front, and we've tightened these screws down, one bit one side, one bit the other, and pull them down in steps, not all one side and then over the other side, because it will pull the wheel crooked on the shaft, and it must on no account be crooked on the shaft. Holger's now putting the final tension on the grub screws.
Ganz zum Schluss dann fest, ne?
Yeah, now they're really nice and tight, and you can see hopefully that you can see the shaft, the pulley wheel is running truly on the shaft. It's not, there's no swing on the movement. It's running true. Okay, see that? Good.
Okay.
Okay. Yet come the last important point is between here, between the shaft or the bearing in the shaft in the eccentric housing here and the pulley wheel, there's excessive Loctite between the two, and we've got to get rid of this Loctite with a piece of paper, or it's going to find its way in possibly into your bearings and the bearings on the shaft here, and that's got to be avoided at all costs. See, Holger's now turning the shaft. He's now turning the shaft with the paper pushed in with a small piece of card, and there's the excessive Loctite being wiped out.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Almost the last stage is putting the belts on. The belt must go right on the inside, and it's got to go right over the big the pulley wheel, and pull the belt into the bottom pulley wheel first, and then into the big pulley wheel at the top, and then just turn the pulley wheel.
Can I just interrupt for 1 minute?
We're talking on the phone. Okay, as we're pulling the belt into the top pulley wheel by just turning the pulley wheel, and it requires a bit of power to do this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's clicked into place. It's not easy. You've got to really pull the wheel around to get it in there. It's really tight. Okay, now comes the second pulley wheel, the second V-belt on the bottom wheel first, and now on the top wheel. And we're going to turn the shaft to pull the belt into the top groove.
Okay.
There it is. It's clicked into place. Okay, there it is.
This one.
Yeah. So, okay. Okay, we're almost at the end now. These two screws have got to be loose here. We're going to loosen these. By doing this, the eccentric shaft now is loose in the two fixing rings, and we turn the shaft away from the motor by gripping the shaft here, as the Holger's doing. We turn that away from the motor, and that tensions the belt by the eccentric on this shaft house here. Yeah? Okay, and we pull the belts as tight as we can until you've only got a millimeter. You've got practically just a millimeter play on the belts. By pushing your finger onto the belts, they should move at the most a millimeter.
Okay.
We'll check that again to see that there's a millimeter. You can only depress the belts by about a millimeter, and they're correctly tensioned.
That's all right.
Yeah. The shaft will hold itself in place. Now we must fix the front screw really tight. It's got to be really, that's the one that does all the work. It's really tightly held. The back one has only got to be lightly screwed down, because this back one is directly over the ball bearings that's in the shaft here. And if that's done up too tightly, it will then damage the ball bearing.
Okay.
So it's just done up tight, and we're gonna, I'm gonna turn it from this side, and Holger's going to screw down the safety nut. He's pulled the safety nut down to lock this screw, and we're doing the same now on the front screw. Holger's now tightening down the safety nut underneath. Okay, that's that finished.
brauchen wir mal die Stütze.
Okay. Here's the last item. The camera sits on, yeah, okay.
Okay.
This is the last item in the small bag here. That's the strut. There's only one, and that's screwed onto this base plate here. And we've placed the engine back onto our windowsill or saran cooking plate to make sure that we get this strut in the exactly right position, so that the motor, so that the reduction gear is not being pulled crooked onto the firewall.
Genau. Jetzt müssen wir anzeichnen, mittig.
Olga's now marking the middle for the hole that's got to be drilled in the strut here.
Genau.
He's marked it off from the hole that's in the base plate. Okay.
Genau. Jetzt. Okay.
Okay. Now we're going to screw onto the strut onto the base plate now. The hole's been drilled in the strut. You can see the hole here. The hole is drilled in the strut, and now we're going to screw it onto the base plate. We're doing it on this hard surface, this very flat surface, and so that this strut has got to be exactly right on this base plate here, or it will pull the engine crooked onto the firewall. See now the motor now sits on this granite plate, and there's not the slightest movement. It's fitting absolutely perfectly onto the plate, and that's how it's got to be. Okay, and that's it, finished.